Sound check September 20th. Sound check, sound check.
And we're live. Welcome to the very last planning committee for this term and my very last planning committee ever. So, good morning. I'd like to call the planning committee meeting to order. Members of the public are advised that our meetings are webcast live by the City of Hamilton and archived on the city's website, and that the presentations and reports considered at this meeting are available on the city's website, and that members of the public can contact the clerk's office to acquire documents in an alternate format. A reminder that all electronic devices, please switch it to non-audible during the committee meetings, and members of the committee are reminded of the 5-minute time limit. Members of the public are also reminded to have 5 minutes to address the committee. Members of staff who are speaking today at today's meeting, if I forget to remind you, please introduce yourself and your position. Today we have with us in council chambers is Councillor Danko, and online we have Councillors Ferguson, Councillor Pearson, Councillor Wilson, Councillor Farr. So we're ready to rock and roll. Madam Clerk, are there any changes to the agenda?
Yes, Madam Chair, there are changes under communications. We have 5.1B, 354 King Street West, OLT 22-002235, zoning bylaw and official plan amendment. That was an OLT decision. Recommendation be received. And added 5.3 Lakewood Beach Community Council respecting 522 and 526 Winona Road, which relate to items 7.4 and 14.1 on the agenda. The recommendation is that it be received and referred to the consideration of items 7.4 and 14.1. Under delegation requests, we have added 6.1 Amir Shazad respecting taxi cab bylaws and a taxi cab advisory committee for the November 29th meeting. We have an added consent item 7.6, Hamilton Municipal Heritage Committee Report 22-009. And under public hearings, 9.1, Ryan Reed respecting Sunday gun hunting in Flamborough. He has requested it be deferred to the November 29th meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. It's been moved by Councillor Ferguson, second by Councillor Pearson, to approve the agenda as amended. Please vote accordingly. And while you're voting, I'd also like to introduce, we have some master students here today from urban planning. We kind of wondered if they lost a bet or if they're being punished, but we're really glad to see you here. So folks, any declarations of interest, please? And the vote was unanimous. Councillor Wilson, please.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning. Declaring an interest on 7.4 and 14.1 due to a business relationship of my spouse with one of the principals. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And the clerk has noted that. So when we get to those items, I'll try to remember. Councillor Ferguson.
Yeah, just a non-exclusionary perceived conflict would be the taxi request for a delegation, but it's just that is not making a decision. So I will not be declaring a formal conflict of interest in this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Pearson. You're muted, ma'am.
Sorry, I will declare conflict on item 9.2, just going back to it. It's John Fairland respecting legality of rental housing. I am a landlord along with my husband and own rental properties.
Thank you. Anyone else? Not seeing anyone. Thank you. So it has been moved by Councillor Wilson, seconded by Councillor Danko, that we approve the minutes of September 6, 2022. Please vote accordingly if there's no questions or comments. Thank you. Communications 5.1. This is regarding the Ontario Land Tribunal decisions. This is 311 and 313 Stone Church Road East, OLT 22-002235, zoning bylaw and official plan amendment, MB 354 King Street West, OLT 21-001127, zoning bylaw and official plan amendment. It's been moved by Councillor Ferguson, seconded by Councillor Wilson, that we receive. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, please vote accordingly. Okay, so we go right on to 5.2, right, Madam Clerk? Thank you. So the Ancaster Village Heritage Community respecting required infrastructure prior to construction. Councillor Ferguson, and seconded by Councillor Danko. Councillor Ferguson, you wanted to speak to this, I assume?
Yeah, very briefly, just that this is a letter from Jim McLeod, and if he's watching, I think he probably is. Site plan approval does not come back to council. That's delegated to staff, and the installation or the need of upgrading any kind of services is analyzed and during the site plan process. So there was a requirement during the site plan approval process to bring up a storm sewer to provide the necessary drainage from 15 Church Street. It was 100% paid for by the developer, and the work is now complete, and the road's been repaved, and it's open. And that's all I have, Madam Chair.
Thank you, and it's been moved and seconded to receive. Please vote accordingly. Thank you. 5.3, Lakewood Beach Community Council respecting 522 and 526 Winona Road. This is on items 7.4 and 14.1. It has been moved by Councillor Pearson and seconded by Councillor, oh, sorry, not Wilson, because you declared a conflict, Councillor Danko, that this please be received and referred to when we consider 7.4 and 14.1. Please vote accordingly. We will ask our questions then. I assume Councillor Pearson has a list of them.
Thank you.
Thank you. So now we're on to delegation requests. Folks, unless the vote is negative, then I will just continue on because I'm seeing a lot of unanimous. Delegation requests. This is respecting the taxi cab bylaws and the taxi cab advisory committee. And this is for the November 29th meeting. So it's been moved by Councillor Wilson, second by Councillor Farr, that we do approve this delegation for November the 29th. I think everything should be deferred to November 29th. Thank you. So now we're on to consent item 7.1. This is the active official amendment, official plan amendment, zoning bylaw amendment, and plan of subdivision applications PED 22186. It has been moved by Councillor Danko, second by Councillor Ferguson, that we receive the report. Are there any concerns, questions? Councillor Wilson, and then Councillor Ferguson. Councillor Wilson.
My apologies, Chair. I neglected publicly to declare my interest on 5.3. It's a correspondence. You did note it as chair, and I did abstain from the vote, but I just wanted to publicly state so. Thank you.
Yep, thank you. Councillor Ferguson.
Yeah, through you, Madam Chairman, to the Director of Planning on Appendix C, or Appendix B as in Bob, page 2 or 3. There is an application that's 1,450 days since it's been filed. And this involves 387, 397, and 405 Hamilton Drive. And the owner is going ballistic on me that this has not been processed yet. And I did put through a motion to get them a head start on getting the derelict, abandoned, or vacant 4 houses in there demolished, and that's now complete. But this is something that's important to the community too, because it's extending Panabaker up to Hamilton Drive as part of the development. And the city at great expense put in a nice walking trail between Tollgate and the Dutch Corners commercial area. And students from Bishop Tonus School and even the people who use the James Smith Park, a large community park, like to walk down to the commercial area, particularly to McDonald's for lunch. And right now they walk down Gardner Road, which is just dangerous. It's a 70-kilometer speed limit, just gravel shoulders, no sidewalks. And once this gets extended to Hamilton Drive, you'll be able to then get across Hamilton Drive into Tollgate, which goes you to the access to this trail, and get the kids off the Garner Road, which is just downright dangerous. I did tell them that I thought the issue was natural heritage, but they insist that That's been resolved through a compensation plan and changing some lots or removing some lots. So that's been approved, but they just can't get it to the planning meeting. And the frustrating part they're telling me now, and it's quite common these days, is that they can't get the planner to call them back. So Steve, could you give me an update on where this application is and when it should be coming to planning? I know this is the last planning meeting of this term, but it sounds like you're getting a full plate ready for November also. So can you give me an update?
So Director Steve Robichaud, if you want to answer that or ask to be at the end, it's up to you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Steve Robichaud, Director of Planning. Planning staff have been working with the applicant to resolve all of the outstanding issues, and we are actually in the process right now of putting together the report schedule for Q1 of the next term of council and looking at which applications we can bring forward and then communicating that back to the applicant. So it's my understanding that we are trying to target to bring that forward into Q1, but that we just have to ensure that all of the issues from all the agencies have been resolved and the applicant's in the full agreement with the terms and conditions. Part of it relates to yes, the secondary plan envisions the extension of the road, which affects some of the natural heritage features, and it's ensuring that we have adequate compensation as well as mitigation measures in place to allow for development to proceed in an orderly fashion while still protecting those environmentally sensitive areas. And that's just one of the things that we've been going back and forth internally with, as well as engaging with the applicant's agent just to confirm all of those conditions and requirements. So, and then hopefully being able to bring it forward in Q1 of next year. We just simply ran out of time this year with the municipal election and no more planning committee meetings for the balance of the calendar year. Thank you.
Okay,
Councillor?
and Steve, they do tell me that they've got a resolution. The city's agreed to it, and they've agreed to it on the natural heritage, because that is a big issue, or was a big issue if it's resolved. So can I please ask you to have your planner call them and tell them what the current plan is, because they're apoplectic. And because they think there's some funny business going on. I don't believe that. I think you're just so doggone busy. Your planners are busy. You've got staff turnover, and but they would like to just get a call back. And if you tell them Q1, they'll probably be okay with that. So could you undertake to have the planner call them, please?
Through you, Madam Chairman. Councillor, I will call them back today or tomorrow to speak to the applicant directly, because I do owe them a phone call. They did call me when I was on vacation, and I just haven't had a chance to reconnect with the applicants while I undertake to call them back, as well as I will speak to the planner on the file to follow up with the applicant as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you for thank you for that. And
Okay.
if you could just let me know what happened, because they'll be on to me again too. And just let me know what the update is and whether they're satisfied now. So that, because quite often you're waiting for information from them, and the owners don't know it, but the consultants do. So I'll leave that with you. Thanks very much.
Thank you. And it has been moved and seconded accordingly. Please vote. Thank you. 7.2 is the Agricultural and Rural Affairs Subcommittee Report 22-002. It's been moved by Councillor Ferguson, seconded by myself, being the two representatives on this committee. It was our last committee of the term and probably one of the fastest ones we've ever had. But thank you to all the committee members, by the way. They really work hard at this. Please vote accordingly. Outside voice? I'm sure hits a thumbs up for Councillor Ferguson.
No, the vote hasn't come up yet. It said it's still loading, but I support it.
I'll vote for Councillor Ferguson for the rest of the day. Don't worry about it.
No, you don't.
Thank you. 7.3, this is the appeal of the Urban Hamilton Official Plan Amendment Application UHOP A 22-006 and Zoning Bylaw Amendment Application ZAC 22-014 to the Ontario Land Tribunal for the lack of decision for lands located at 186 Hunter Street in Ward 2, PED 22190. Does the committee wish to see a presentation? And if not, I need a mover and a seconder to waive that presentation. What's the committee's, thank you, Councillor Ferguson, or sorry, Councillor Farr, you wish to speak, please?
Many interested residents in the vicinity, so yes to the presentation. Thank you for asking.
Okay. Elena? Long time no see. She worked really hard this weekend at the Bimbrook Fair, folks. So whenever you're ready, and just introduce yourself in your position, that'd be great. Thank you.
Okay, good morning, everyone. My name is Elena Baldessera. I'm Planner 1 on the urban team, and I will be presenting about the application for 186 Hunter Street East. So the application that was submitted was for an official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment for the lands located at 186 Hunter Street East. This is a location map showing the property. So as you can see, the property is bounded by 3 streets: Hunter Street East to the north, Liberty Street East to the east of the property, and Grange Street to the west. This is just an aerial view. This is just an aerial view showing the location of the property. There's currently a vacant commercial building on the site with some surface parking. This is a proposal of the site plan showing what the applicant is proposing. It's a 12-story apartment building for affordable housing. The accesses to the parking will be off of Liberty Street and Ferguson Avenue South, or Grange Street as it's known, on the other side of Hunter Street East. So here are the elevations for the proposed apartment building. These are just some aerial or some site visit photos. So this is the subject lands from the other side of Hunter Street East looking south. This is looking down Hunter Street, both east and west. So the image on the left or on the right would be looking at Hunter Street going westbound, and then looking east would be the image that you see on the other side. So here is looking north of the property. There's both some commercial and some existing residential, some single-family homes. And then here is looking south on Liberty Street. So as you can see, again, there's a lot of single-family homes. Similarly, this is looking from the view on Grange Street or Ferguson Avenue. And so these are, again, single-family homes adjacent to the property. From the previous image, you could see there was another apartment building on the other side of Ferguson Avenue. So the application that was presented to you was appealed for non-decision. The application was submitted on December 22nd, 2021, deemed complete in January, and then it was appealed in June. So that's all I have in terms of the information about what was submitted and the appeal. I can take any questions if there's any questions.
Thank you. Councillor Farr does have questions. As soon as you can unshare for me, that would be great. Thank you. Councillor Farr, questions?
Through you, Chair. Thank you, Elena, for the brief presentation. That's all that's really required, since ultimately this is recognizing an appeal. Notwithstanding, in this and every planning session, we see appeals that somehow don't happen, even though I think Councillor Ferguson was alluding to something that's at about 1,000 days. We see 2,000 days, sometimes 3,000 days on these already deemed complete applications, but they don't go to OLT. This one, through you, Chair, went to OLT within, what was it, 152 days? 120 days is the rule, but within 152 days, they decided to go to OLT, correct?
Through the chair, that's correct.
Through you, Chair, did they say why?
Through the chair, I don't have any specific reason. It's just the appeal for non-decision.
Thank you, Councillor.
So through you, the why is just we didn't make the decision in time.
She said she didn't know. It just happened. Go ahead.
Through the chair, there were some other issues that were identified but never resolved. So other than that.
Through you, can we say what those other issues were that weren't resolved?
They were the comments that were received through the first submission. So through the chair, we did provide them with initial comments and we were going to work through them, but they did appeal for non-decision.
Yeah, through you, Chair. I hoped and trusted we could do that, given the proponent's record in working with us. But in this particular case, yeah, this one's a bit unfortunate, but we'll see where we can land. And certainly, Elena, through you, nothing prevents us from continuing to try to work with the applicants and the community, correct? In advance of waiting out what is now a 1.5 to 2-year process for an actual hearing, right? Through you, Chair.
Elena?
Through the chair, that's correct.
You were kind enough to attend 2 non-statutory meetings. I believe them to be non-statutory. I asked for the 150 some odd Corktowners showed up from the immediate area, and then there was the other one, and the proponents' representative showed up to that one. Then the second one, the proponents weren't invited. Through you, Chair, was it clear to you? It certainly was to me that the vast majority, if not all of those folks from the neighborhood had some issues.
Thank you, Elena.
Through the chair, that was clear, and some of those issues were included as part of the information report. So they were identified that we did receive comments from the public.
Thank you, Councillor.
Final thing, since this is a public meeting, and I'm sure both sides are watching this closely, you said at the start of your presentation, and the report also indicates this, that, quote, it's a 12-story for affordable housing, end quote. But what we learned in both of those meetings, the first one with the proponent, and actually the proponent's rep had noted this, it's not a completely affordable housing project. Despite the sign on the site, what we see in this report, what you've just said in your presentation. So do we know yet what it is that they're intending? They did say publicly in the first public meeting that they weren't absolutely sure, but it certainly wasn't all units affordable. Do we know the mix? Do we know what type of affordability in that mix? Through you, Chair?
Thank you.
Through the chair, so the information that I presented was what was submitted with their application. They did provide some additional detail at those non-statutory meetings, but I don't have any formal response as to if that impacts how much of it will be affordable and things like that. But in terms of what was presented today, it's based on the application that was submitted.
So nothing official. Thank you, Councillor.
Okay, no, yeah, fair enough, but we definitely want to hone in on that and certainly better understand what spectrum of affordability we're talking about, because those definitions are going to be important going forward too. Still great that there's going to be some complement. I don't think it's the entire project. I don't have any more questions. I want to thank you, Elena, for all the extra time, not only on this file, but apparently at the Binbrook Fair this past weekend. And you're always a pleasure to work with. That was a great brief presentation, and hope to be able to figure this one out with you in the near future, and where all parties are pleased with the result. I do have a few questions for staff at the appropriate time. Thanks very much. Thanks, Elena.
Thank you. Councillor Farr, the staff is here, so you're still on questions for the staff. No one else is on the speakers list, so do you want to continue with this file?
I'll be brief, colleagues. I just have 3 more questions. I did allude to it through you to our lawyer, who is spending way too much time at OLT, but does a terrific job for us. Patrick, through the chair, I had mentioned to Elena, we have a series of OPAs and ZBLs before us where applications were deemed complete some 1,000, 1,500, 2,000, 3,000 days ago, but they're not going to OLT. They're still trying to work with us, and for whatever reasons, I'm trying to hone in on why this one, after only 152 days, decided to take that route. Do we know? I asked the same of Elena.
So
Through the chair, no, we don't have those details, other than that that's kind of on the applicant to decide if they want to take advantage of their statutory rights sooner rather than later.
thank you, Councillor.
Through you, increasingly, is that opportunity, that 120 days, well, on day 121, taking this option more and more, is it being presented to applicants because we are so busy here in Hamilton, and of course other cities with our planning divisions?
Patrick, can you please introduce yourself and your position?
Yeah, my apologies. So Patrick McDonald, Legal Services. So through the chair, there have been more non-decision appeals, not just in Hamilton, but through talking to my colleagues throughout Southern Ontario. That's been a trend over the last couple of years, and certainly we're not alone in seeing that increase, and certainly at an earlier time as well. But the decision on how early those come in is up to the individual applicant.
Thank you, Councillor.
Quick editorial. I suspect it has something to do with provincial leadership, and some of the comments made by the leader and the Conservatives on wanting to expedite files and so on and so forth. And that's fair game. That's who we elected. So finally, through you, Patrick, the residents, as you probably know, and I know Elena is aware of this, they want to participate. 25 are on the record today. They therefore, can you confirm, are eligible to participate? They just need to go to that first OLT in a year and a half or 2 years from now and ask that they can participate, correct? Through you?
Thank you, Patrick.
So through the chair, there's already been a CMC in this matter. So anyone who wishes to seek party or participant status should have appeared at that first appearance. The hearing is not set to begin until the spring, April, I believe. And there are no more CMCs before that. So any residents who may wish to be involved, either as individuals or as a group, should contact the tribunal's case coordinator at the earliest opportunity to try and make that request for status.
Thank you, Councillor.
Well, this leads to another question then, through you to Elena or yourself. Certainly the residents that have attended and held public meetings, well versed on the file, definitely not happy that it's gone to OLT, but want to participate. So do we know that if any of them or representatives on their behalf showed up to this CMC that Patrick just claimed already happened? Through you.
Thank you. Mr. McDonald, who came to the pre-hearing?
Through the chair, the pre-hearing was some time ago, so I'd have to double check the procedure order the tribunal issued to see who was there. But but I don't have that in front of me, but I can check in a minute.
Thank you, Councillor.
Through you to Patrick or Elena, were they advised of the pre-hearing date?
Chair, so the onus for providing notice to any eligible persons for a tribunal CMC, that comes from the tribunal, and they provide those directions typically to the applicant to provide notice. So anyone who was statutorily entitled to notice would have received notice of that first CMC from the applicant based on the tribunal's directions, and that would have been anyone that the tribunal determined was entitled to notice, because as there was no statutory public meeting on that one, the normal rules of providing a delegation would not apply, and it would be up to the tribunal to determine who gets notice.
Hence why they go so quickly. Thank you, Councillor Farr.
Through you, Elena, do you have any word on the street on this?
Through the chair, I do not.
Thank you.
Okay, so just to be clear, because I'll have to pass this along to the residents or representatives of the residents there, they should get in touch then, Patrick, with the OLT ASAP?
That's what we heard. Thank you, Mr. McDonald.
Through the chair, that's correct.
What are their chances if they weren't advised or made aware? I'm just learning of this too, that the pre-hearing has already occurred, the OMC. So what normally would happen in a situation like this if the proponent didn't advise them? Through you.
Thank you, Mr. McDonald.
Through the chair, that's up to the tribunal's discretion. They sometimes allow late requests for status as long as it's far enough out from the hearing, but sometimes they do not, and it's subject to the position of the applicant. So I can't comment on what their chances would be of getting that, but they should request from the tribunal the earliest opportunity, because the tribunal does sometimes allow requests even after the first CMC.
Thank you, Councillor.
So, okay, the final question, and thank you, everybody. Talked to one of the residents who knows the file better than any of us combined, and just on Saturday night at a movie night at a local park, and she asked this question of me, and I said I'll look into it further. Certainly they want to participate. She confirmed that with me. They want to attend the hearing, and somebody made a suggestion to them that they choose a rep or hire a planner. Does anybody on staff know about this? Was it our side that suggested this? Because there is 25 of them on today's record communicating their issues. Somebody made that suggestion. Was it us?
Through the chair, I don't think legal made that suggestion, but the basis for that may be that individuals typically who are self-represented would appear as participants, and their ability to provide evidence would be much more limited. They can only give a written statement. They can't appear. They can't call their own witnesses. So if residents are organized and can have party status as an incorporated neighborhood organization, for example, they can potentially seek party status, and they'd have ability to call witnesses, give oral evidence, and so forth. But that would come with risks and expectations. So I can't advise whether that would be preferable for them, but certainly if they have any questions on just the procedural nature of how that works at the tribunal can answer those to the extent possible, and certainly legal can assist with at least factual procedural questions.
Thank you, Councillor.
Elena, do you have anything further?
I'm sorry?
Does Elena have anything to add to that? Through you?
Through the chair, I don't have anything else to add. We would defer to legal on just being able to provide any information.
Thank you, Councillor.
Okay, no, thank you very much. I'll just quickly state that I look forward to working with both sides. I firmly believe right now we're pretty far apart, but there are things like ingress, egress on Liberty, which doesn't seem to make any sense at all. We saw slide number 2, that's nothing but residential houses. It would only lead to a whole lot more traffic and a lot of cut through in a residential neighborhood. Ferguson's a different story. It's a one-way street that meets a little two-way at Hunter, and a Hunter ingress egress makes total sense, which I've already shared with the proponent on behalf of the residents, among other things. And so I will continue to keep the dialogue open. One thing all of us agree with on this particular file is it's time to clean up the property and put something that's, fitting there, right on the cusp, on the border of our downtown secondary plan area. So it's ripe for something, for renewal and brownfield cleanup and all of those things, but finding the balance is, what we're going to we will achieve going forward. So thank you to staff and thank you to all involved on the file. Bye.
Okay, thank you. It's been moved and seconded. Please vote accordingly. I had Councillor Farr, Councillor Pearson. Thank you. If anyone needs to put thumbs up, let me know verbally, please, because I can't see you on the screen right now. Oh. Staff recommendations. Thank you very much, everyone. We're on to 7.4. We already have a conflict of interest with Councillor Wilson, just to remind. Oh, sorry. Oh, we received the staff presentation. My apologies, folks. Now, Councillor Farr, second by Councillor Pearson, to receive the report. 7.3, please vote accordingly. We have a technical issue here, folks. Don't throw your computer against the wall this time. It's up now. Please vote accordingly. Councillor Wilson, did your vote come through? Thank you.
Sorry, Chair, I voted it seemed like I voted 3 or 4 times.
You're only allowed one, just saying. So that's 13-0, thank you. 7.4, appeal of the Urban Hamilton Official Plan Amendment Application UHOP 22007 and Zoning Bylaw Amendment Application ZAC 22015 to the Ontario Land Tribunal OLT for lack of decision for lands located at 522 and 526 Winona Road, Stony Creek, PED 22191. This is in Ward 10. Councillor Wilson has a conflict. That just sets things up. There is a related private and confidential report on this agenda under 14.1. Does the committee wish to see the staff presentation? Councillor Pearson, I'll refer to you, please.
Madam Chair, yeah, I don't have a problem with that if it's brief. Because we had a neighborhood meeting on this and we have not had the official public meeting. So certainly I would appreciate it. I think then my colleagues can get a grasp of the development proposal and the intensification being proposed.
Okay, thank you. So James, do you mind coming down, please? Is it James? Where'd he go? Oh. He was hiding. I feel like that every day. As soon as you set up your presentation, please introduce yourself and your title, please.
Good morning, Chair, members of the committee, staff, and public in attendance. My name is James Van Roy. I'm a senior planner with our Development Planning Division rural team, and I'll be discussing the non-decision appeal to the Ontario Land Tribunal for Urban Hamilton Official Plan Amendment and Zoning Bylaw Amendment application for lands located at 522 and 526 Winona Road, Stony Creek. Just a bit of background, the applications were submitted in December 24, 2021, and deemed complete on January 20th, 2022. And on June 6th, 164 days, an appeal was received for both applications. The applications proposed to develop 1,212 units in a variety of built forms, such as multiple dwellings and townhouses. So here we have our site. Lot is irregular in shape and is 3.42 hectares. Site's bound by Lake Ontario to the north. To the east is East Street, and to the west is Winona Road, and to the south we have single attached residential dwellings. Here we have an aerial view of the site. Again, you can just see that we have the single attached dwellings to the east, the south, and the west, and Lake Ontario to the north. And it is the former site of the Liuna Gardens banquet facility, which was also a construction training ground. Those buildings have since been demolished. And here we have our concept plan. What was proposed were two 24-story buildings along with two-story amenity area. Those are central to that concept plan. Fronting or flanking East Street and Winona, we have two 15-story multiple dwellings, and then we also have public open space that would have been dedicated to the city. And just south of that public open space, we have two-story townhouse dwellings, 5 blocks of them. And at the very south of the property, we have 4-story stacked townhouse dwellings in the form of 2 blocks. Here we have the concept plan. So this is just for the multiple dwellings, the towers. So the two 24-story dwellings are central there, flanked by the 15-story dwellings on the outside sides of that. This is looking at the building as if you're looking from Liuna Court, or south if you were south of the building. And then here we have the east and west elevations of the two 15-story multiple dwellings. As part of the applicant's public consultation strategy, as the councilor alluded to earlier, this was a virtual open house meeting was held. This was on March 29th, 2022. Notice of the open house was sent to properties highlighted in yellow, shown here. And just to go to our site, here we have a site. Here we have a view of our site. The site is on the left. We're looking towards the Niagara Escarpment here on Winona Road. Here we're at the same point, just looking towards Lake Ontario. I should note there is a single detached dwelling left on the property that's municipally known as 530 Winona Road. Here we have a view of 522 Winona Road. This is also part of the subject lands. Here we have a view of our site. As you can see, the buildings have been demolished. And again, just a view of the single detached dwellings that surround the property in these following slides. I'll go slowly over them. This is Liuna Court, as if the subject lands would be in the background here. Here we have a neighboring property to the south. This is on East Street. And this is a view of East Street as well, single detached dwellings. And East Street continued. Here we have a view of Wendeki Drive looking east. This is kind of where East Street meets Wendeki Drive. And just in the broader context, here we have Winona Road. The site is very far in the background there. This is Winona Road looking the other direction. And here we have a view of the newer type of development in the area. This is John Wilson Park, which is to the south. And a view looking east. This is as if you're looking towards Niagara. And this is as if you're looking towards Toronto, Toronto bound, and this is on Winona Road Bridge. And lastly, we have a view here looking south. You can kind of see the Costco in the background there as well, and the Niagara Escarpment. Just as part of the planning process, this application was circulated to property owners within 120 meters of the subject lands. A sign was posted on the property in accordance with the Planning Act. The applicant also hosted an online open house on March 29th, 2022. We received 34 written submissions from the surrounding residents with concerns related to character, height, density, traffic and parking, pedestrian vehicular safety, pedestrian public transit connectivity, visual impact, lack of commercial use, lack of open space, notification and circulation process, issues with infrastructure, crime, site servicing capacity, overdevelopment of the site, vegetation, construction, sun and shadow impacts, tenure and community benefit, and as well as compatibility with the existing low density development. Just at a high level, the staff concerns that we have right now are with capacity for infrastructure and in terms of sanitary capacity, as well as traffic infiltration into the nearby neighborhoods, and of course, height and density for the subject lands. This concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Taking down your presentation, please. I'm going to go to Councillor Pearson, even though I don't see her on the list. I'm sure she has their questions.
Sorry, I apologize, Madam Chair. I was writing as he was talking, so I forgot to go in the chat. James, thank you so much for that information. And I guess I want to just preclude, and you stated it earlier, that notices were circulated to a much broader area of the neighborhood, and that was a request I had put forward to the developer's agent. Over and above the 120 meters, and I think you highlighted the area. Basically went to, I think it was, is it Creonona or I think it was Creonona Road westerly, and then to the I believe the city limits. I don't have the map in front of me, but it was much wider area, and I appreciated that. So I just wanted to ask, because I appreciate the points that you've raised, certainly heard loud and clear. In the night of the neighborhood meeting, requested the applicant to please go back to the drawing board. Disappointed that there was an opportunity to have staff bring a report forward with regards to the reviews of all the studies, et cetera, and that we could have the public meeting on this, but taking it directly to the Ontario Municipal Board. Madam Chair, my question to James, and I just want to be sure. James, you mentioned a couple of times about Leona Court. Leona Court is not part of this development. There is no proposal of any infill that will come through on Leona Court. There is no road access that's proposed to open up Leona Court. Is that correct?
Through the chair, that's correct.
Thank you. But I believe there are a couple buildable lots that could be pursued later, but not in conjunction with this development.
Through the chair, that's correct.
Thank you for that. Madam Chair, I have a couple of other questions, but I think there'll be more of our legal representative, Patrick McDonald, with regards to the email received from the Lakewood Beach Community Council. So I thank James for all of the information. It's certainly an unfortunate situation to be in with the neighborhood and the residents, and the uncertainty now because it's before the board. Thank you.
Thank you. So James, if you don't mind, you can have a seat. That way you can rest a bit. And if you can sit near a microphone just in case you're required to answer again. So Councillor Pearson, go ahead. Your questions to Mr. McDonald. And by the way, folks, there is a confidential report coming up at 14.1. So I'm going to caution you if there's anything about strategies and things like that, I will caution you not to ask. Go ahead, Councillor Pearson.
And I will certainly appreciate that, but I don't believe that there will be, but certainly stop me at any time. So I just want to comment and ask James Patrick, you've seen the email, and I just want to be sure because I want to cover off the concerns. So there is a concern of us being a lame duck council, and the future liability as far as costs for, I take it, the legal representation and the planners to defend the city's position on this application. I'm not sure if you can answer this actually, because maybe it's not your bailiwick and legal, but I'll ask you to try. Do you believe that we have an issue if we deal with this today that we shouldn't be, that we are really a lame duck council and shouldn't be spending this, confirming or acknowledging that this amount of money could be spent?
Well, that just wasted the last 2 hours when we gave you permission to do the others. Go ahead, Mr. McDonald.
Through the chair, I think it depends on the specific nature of that's arrived at. I don't think it precludes us from giving directions on the appeal itself. And if there is a question of lame duck on any particular financial items that might be outside our authority, we can always come back for those at a later time. But I think the intent, again, through the confidential instructions report to come later, the intent is to get instructions at least on the planning merits.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you. That's great. And I just want to clear up, because there's a comment as far as the dollar value as well with regards to land acquisition, and I'm believing that has to do with the shoreline dedication of about 100 feet. But I would assume that that's going to be through parkland dedication as their commitment.
Thank you. Would that be under Mr. McDonald, sir, or would that be, or ma'am, or that be under James?
Whoever
Sorry.
wishes to answer it, Madam Chair.
Sorry, through the chair, just for clarity, we're referring to which specific parcel in the city's acquisition?
Okay, so there's the waterfront public access that's going to be dedicated back over to the city. So there's a comment or question about land acquisition. And I don't believe the city's purchasing this land. I mean, we will acquire it, but it's part of their dedication as far as parkland dedication. Would that not be correct?
Through the chair, I haven't seen the particulars of that specific detail. We do have a first CMC coming up later this month where we'll be sorting out some of those issues. But generally speaking, if lands are required to be dedicated as a condition of parkland dedication under the Planning Act, then no, we would not be paying for lands acquired for parkland.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that. That's what I just wanted to be sure for the public record, Madam Chair. I just want them to understand that. And also, James, or Patrick, you mentioned it earlier on the last report. The case management conference on this particular application comes October 28th. The public still have not received notices, and could you just please reiterate who sets the responsibility and directive for providing notices to residents who have provided written submissions and chimed in?
Thank you. Mr. McDonald?
Through the chair, so again, on the directions for notice for CMCs and other hearing events, that is determined by the tribunal at their discretion. And typically they direct the applicant or appellant to provide notice of those and provide proof of who was served. Notice for a first CMC, I believe, is typically roughly 30 days advance notice. So if it's scheduled for the October 28th, anyone who has received notice or entitled to it rather would get that probably in the next week or two. However, again, that does not preclude anyone else from showing up who did not receive notice. And certainly if there's anyone who wants to know details of how they can show up or call into that, they're certainly still entitled to attend, and we can provide those details if desired.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you again, Madam Chair. As I said, I just wish clarification for the viewing public, and I know we'll be dealing with this in camera. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any other further questions and comments, so it has been moved by Councillor Pearson, second by Councillor Danko, to receive the staff's presentations. Please vote accordingly. Should have probably done that all at once. Thank you, and it's been moved and seconded by the same two that we receive the report 7.4. Councillor Pearson, second by Councillor Danko.
Sorry, Madam Chair, should we also receive the email? Sorry, the email?
Absolutely, my apologies, but we already did receive it and we referred it, so it's already been and it's also been referred to 14.1 as well.
Fine, thank you.
Thank you, everyone. 7.5, Comprehensive Zoning Bylaw Work Plan, PED 22193. Anyone on the committee wish to see a staff presentation? Councillor Wilson, please. Okay, so who would like to take this? Shannon, we thought we'd get away with this. So Shannon's coming down to the podium to set up the display.
I have yet. I think it's just catching up here. Here we go. Oh, I can move that. Sorry. I'm gonna hide it up there. Good morning. It's a good way to start the presentation. Good morning, my name is Shannon Mackay. I'm the manager of Zoning and Committee of Adjustment, and I'm here today to present on the Comprehensive Zoning Bylaw 05200 Work Plan. The Comprehensive Zoning Bylaw has been implemented in phases since 2005, starting with the downtown zones. The bylaw has been updated by major land use categories, including the downtown zones, parks and open space zones, institutional zones, industrial zones, transit-oriented corridor zones, rural zones, commercial and mixed-use zones, waterfront zones, and utility zones. Sorry. Each of these land use categories have been developed alongside the existing policy framework and amended at times to reflect changing legislation direction, new strategic projects, and to align with new secondary plans. Zoning Bylaw 05200 was created to be a living document where we actively monitor, review, and revise regulations, terminology, and structure on an ongoing basis to make sure it's always up to date. During the development of the major land use categories, the zoning team also participates in other strategic projects to provide direction and provide implementation measures for not only the comprehensive zoning bylaw, but also other former municipal zoning bylaws so that we can collectively maintain and move zoning regulations forward equitably. Historically, some of the projects that have been worked on and more recently include the outdoor entertainment on commercial patios. These regulations were monitored and revised in coordination with our partners in municipal law enforcement to remove zoning barriers to allow outdoor commercial patios and to allow the noise bylaw to continue to regulate any nuisances created on the patios. Pleasant View updates. Additional dwelling units, which we've seen more recently in updates in June of this year. The Waterdown Node Secondary Plan implementation, Centennial Neighborhood Secondary Plan implementation, and then again more recently in August, zoning bylaw amendments to align with the Municipal Comprehensive Review and Grids 2 implementation. The last major land use category are the residential zones, which are currently underway with staff. On August 14th, Council approved the first phase of the new residential zones, being the low-density residential 1 and R1A zones, which have been added to 05200. The new zones, along with the amendments that came forward in August for the implementation of the official plan amendments, saw over 40 zones amended to allow for a wider range of low-density residential forms, eliminating exclusionary zoning, and incorporating a large portion of the former City of Hamilton into zoning bylaw 05200. As we proceed through the next phases of the residential zoning project, we will see the remaining low-density residential lands that are included in secondary plans and remnant low-density residential lands that have not already been included added into zoning bylaw 05200 through the first 2 quarters of 2023. Staff are also continually working through the medium and high-density residential zoning categories, which includes some additional studies that are underway by the city, including a citywide parking study, citywide urban design standards, as well as neighborhood infill guidelines. These zoning categories are being reviewed by staff to look at additional intensification options along corridors, to incorporate additional lands into our transit-oriented corridor zones where possible, and to align with the amended official plan policies. While we develop the last components of the residential zoning project, staff are also continuously working on some strategic projects that will help to continue to keep the bylaw up to date as it exists, as well as provide updates to the former municipal bylaws to continue to provide updates and regulations that are reflective of strategic projects and initiatives throughout the city. We also have to continually monitor these bylaws to align with legislative changes. We saw that through the secondary dwelling regulation review, and address outstanding council motions, including some residential or rural residential lands that have not been incorporated into the bylaw, some remnant commercial properties that have not been updated in the bylaw, and then some remaining components of the outstanding business list, which deal with some arterial commercial type uses. We're also participating with our partners in transportation planning with the parking review to make sure that our whole parking section of 05200 is updated not only in content but in format to make it easier to review and to be understood by the public. And we're following up on the secondary dwelling units detached in the rural area, partnering with Public Works to do additional source water management reports to allow for additional information to be provided and incorporated into the bylaw. And we continually monitor all of the administrative sections of the bylaw to provide updates for ease of use, transparency, and to address any housekeeping amendments that continually are addressed and identified through staff. And lastly, we are continually working on outstanding appeals. At the moment, we have 4 outstanding commercial and mixed-use appeals that we are hoping to resolve by the end of the year, and anticipate residential zoning as we bring it on stream to have appeals. However, the first low-density residential zones did not get appealed, so they are incorporated and will be enacted as soon as the official plan amendment has been final approved by the ministry. That concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. I have Councillor Wilson first, please. Can you just take your presentation down? Go ahead, Councillor Wilson.
Thank you. Thank you to Manager Mackay for that, all the work that she continues to do on this mammoth exercise. I just have, at this point, 2 questions. The first one is, Shannon, how does an arterial corridor review, how is that different from the outcome of, say, a transit-oriented corridor outcome, or are they one and the same? Is it the same? Are they the same principles? Thank you. Through the chair.
Thank you. Shannon?
Through the chair, yes. We're looking at the arterial roads, sorry, I get it mixed up with arterial commercial, arterial roads, to evaluate if there's any opportunity to incorporate the transit-oriented corridor zoning along those roads in addition to what was initially approved in 2016.
Okay. Thank you very much. Through the chair, my second question is on the green building standards to be incorporated into site plan guidelines. Could you just confirm, are these therefore prescriptive deliverables or achievements that the development has to provide, or is it a negotiated outcome as guidelines per se? Nice to haves as opposed to must haves. Thank you. Through the chair.
Through the chair, at the last planning committee, September 6th, staff presented the first phase of the green building standards, which incorporated some asks, some mandatory, some optional, that would be incorporated through development applications for low density residential. We'll continue down that path for medium density and high density residential as we move into those categories. They will form part of the site plan guidelines or the urban design standards in the long run, and will be implemented through the outcome of those guidelines as either optional or mandatory in the review of future development applications.
Thank you. Through the chair, on that, the mandatory versus the optional, what guides planning staff on landing on either of those? Is it the legislative authority to do so, or what informs where you sit on those things? Thank you. Through the chair.
Through the chair, the guidelines would be reviewed to interpret whether or not we could incorporate zoning regulations to implement the outcomes of the guidelines, whether or not it's built form standards that would be incorporated into the actual site plan guidelines, or, as you said, the optional in the review of applications, some asks that might not form part of the regulatory framework. So the guidelines, as they are developed and reviewed, would have to be evaluated to determine whether or not they would be compulsory and implemented through zoning or through the guidelines and asks, so to speak.
Okay, thank you. Those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ferguson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And to Shannon, you said that the U5200 is a working document. You're always trying to keep it current. And we discovered through an application on Old Gulf Links Road in Ancash in the Meadowlands that this was, I believe, an error put into 05200. Are you fixing that during this review?
Through the chair, we understand that to be the associated with parking regulations in areas outside of kind of downtown, where the bylaw has applied some standards that were developed for downtown zones or along the transit corridor. And so through the citywide parking analysis, we would evaluate the projected parking regulations and the applicability to not only the downtown, but the former communities, and to interpret whether or not additional parking revisions need to be incorporated to reflect the communities where parking is occurring.
Councillor?
Not sure I understood the answer. Are you going to correct
that
it
again?
Are you going to correct it then for being in 05200? And in that particular case, on Old Gulf Links Road, there was no one within 120 meters, so the public were notified. It's not a transit route, but they weren't required to even have a parking space for every unit. And that's because you use the downtown 05200 rather than Ancaster zoning bylaw. So I think it's bigger than just parking, isn't it? To get it back into a proper zoning that is more conducive for the area.
Shannon, are you able to answer that specific file?
I don't know the details on the specific file, but we are reviewing the parking on a citywide basis. And so if there was rationale through the parking study to adjust parking requirements in the former municipalities, we could do that through the bylaw, but we don't have the outcomes of that study yet. We understand that it's part of the review.
Thank you. So, Councillor Ferguson, this is just the work plan. This is not anything that we're approving today, other than just receiving the work plan.
I get that, Madam Chair. Through a question through you then to the director. Steve, you intend, I've brought this up now, I think it's the third time at a planning meeting, about getting this fixed. Is there no plans to fix it then? Because it clearly was wrong for that location to have only one parking spot per unit and only for 70% of the units with no public transit in the area. And it's a long walk even to the commercial area to go shopping.
Okay, thank you. Director?
Through you, Madam Chairman, to the councillor. The short answer is yes, but we want to apply that lens coming out of the parking study to determine what would be an appropriate parking ratio required in those areas of the city that are fully transit supported, those areas that are transitioning to being transit supportive, but also recognizing there are some areas of the city that transit may not be available, or it may not be available for a long time. And in that case, may ensure that we have an appropriate parking standard in place. As Ms. Mackay indicated, the original parking requirements in 05200 were developed around the downtown area, and they have been applied now on a citywide basis. And there are some areas in the city that are not, transit is not there to support the development, and it does not appear that transit will be coming in the next short to medium term. And in that case, there's two lenses. What is the appropriate parking standard per unit, as well as the other issue, and I expressed this to the development industry last week, do we need to introduce a visitor parking requirement in some areas as well? And those are the things that we are looking at between planning and our transportation planning colleagues in the update to the parking bylaws, parking regulation section of the zoning bylaw. And once that's done, that'll allow us to correct or update the zoning bylaw on a citywide basis as dealing with the parking issues. And this location, this general part of the city, is one of those areas that we've highlighted as an example where transit may not be available, and therefore we have to ensure that adequate parking is being provided. So it is on our work plan, and I think Ms. Mackay has identified it as one of the properties, one of the geographic areas that needs to be further investigated as she develops the medium and high, as her team is developing the medium and high density zoning regulations. Thank you.
So Steve, developers then can keep applying in this area and applying the wrong parking calculation and getting staff support for it, because I have no idea when the parking review is going to come back to committee.
Through you, Madam Chairman, and people have the right to make an application, but we are cognizant of this parking issue and whether or not the standard makes sense as it relates to from a transit supported perspective or a land use perspective. So although they may ask to have no parking or a very low parking standard, if it does not work, then staff would not be in a position to recommend approval based on the information and the understanding that we have of this area. So we would be encouraging people to ensure that they're providing adequate parking based on the likelihood that transit may or may not be available for any site across the entire city of Hamilton. Thank you.
So for the application that was returned back then, because you originally recommended approval, but I turned it back so we could have a meeting with the developer on it, which didn't go well. On that one, you'll be changing your recommendation then before it comes back to get to a proper parking fix, if you will. I just want to make sure, Steve, we don't get in a situation where people have to have cars at that location and they're going to park out on Gulf Links Road, which is going to be developed with other developments, and we're going to have a mess in our hands. So will that be corrected before that comes back and we get final approval to that application? I think, did you know the one I'm speaking about?
Thank you, Steve.
Through you, Madam Chairman. The applicant is not asked to have it come back to Planning Committee for consideration, but if the results of the parking review comes first, then that'll set the new standard, and then we will have to follow up with the applicant as to how they propose to respond to the new parking standard. So I don't know if Mr. Hollingworth can update, or Mrs. Mackay, in terms of the timelines for the completion of the parking study in front of Planning Committee, but that's really what's dependent in terms of the sequencing and order of events, whether how quickly we can get that parking report in front of committee and then translate it into a new zoning bylaw set of regulations. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, to you, Madam Chairman, then to Brian Hollingworth, when's the parking study going to be finished?
Brian?
We're hoping for early 2023.
And Brian, do you mind
Brian
introducing yourself,
Hollingworth,
please?
Director of Transportation, Planning and Parking.
Thank you. Go ahead, Councillor.
Okay, because I'm leaving office of Planning Committee today. This is my last meeting. And if this thing's allowed to go ahead, it's just going to be a mess. And I don't know how we prevent that if you're going to wait and continue to wait for more studies when we know we have an error there. So I just throw myself at the mercy of staff and the next councillor that comes in to try to deal with this matter. But whoever the new councillor is, I'll certainly be briefing him on this issue. I guess that's all, Madam Chair.
Thank you. So it has been moved by Councillor Wilson, seconded by Councillor Ferguson, to receive the staff presentation and to receive the staff report. And do it all at once because we're just receiving. Please vote accordingly. Thank you, Shannon. Councillor Pearson, vote please. I heard that. Sorry? Councillor Pearson, can you put your thumbs up, please, or vote accordingly? Thank you. Have we got it now, Lisa? Thank you. 7.6, Hamilton Municipal Heritage Committee Report 22009. It has been moved by Councillor Farr, seconded by Councillor Danko to approve the 4 recommendations in the report. Councillor Farr, you're up first.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I apologize, but my chat has gone blank on me. I don't know if the same has happened to others. I just want to say this report turned over very quickly. Thank you for a great term of extensive work by the volunteers on this committee, by our staff, and by Councillor Pearson. On item 4, I just want to highlight that this is a very good example of the work this committee does. There was some sense of urgency when this one came forward the other day. I believe Member Brown kind of led the charge on item 4 on this report before us, respecting Television City. 163 Jackson, and the committee decided that we step aside from the delegated authority on this one, and that staff report back to HMHC with respect to Television City. Big project, good that it goes through this form, and good that they asked for Municipal Heritage Committee report that includes additional options for the stabilization of the resources. Nice catch and good work. On 2, I have 2 remaining properties with respect to the objections on the Beasley neighborhood inventory. So through you to Alyssa, quick question just before I get to, at the appropriate time, according to the chair, an amendment to this. Just how many properties initially were put on the registry thanks to this great volunteer effort and your work as well? And after these final 2, should they be approved, how many will remain?
Thank you. Who would like to answer that? Oh, I'm sorry, didn't see you. Can you please introduce yourself and your title? Thank you.
Alyssa Golden, Heritage Project Specialist with the Tourism and Culture Division, through the chair to the councillor. So as a result of this community-led inventory, the Beasley neighborhood inventory, there were originally 428 properties recommended for listing on the register. There were 14 that were removed due to some owner opposition through the original report that came forward in June. So at that point, we had added 414 properties to the register, and owners were notified of that listing following council's decision. And in front of you today is a report through the Heritage Committee for 2 properties that had been objected after receiving notice of listing. So if those 2 properties were to be removed and this recommendation were amended, there would be 412 resulting that would remain on the register.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In my baseball math, I think we're still batting about 960 there. And again, that's in large part thanks to the Hamilton Municipal Heritage Committee and the Beasley volunteers who put this together. You'll recall that the number of amendments, as small as they were brought to Planning Committee a couple of months ago. And as Alyssa just alluded to, these 2 were not part of the conversation. Afterwards, both residents came to me and sought an amendment. They do not wish to be on the registry like those few that Alyssa had mentioned. And so at the appropriate time, I'd like to amend B of item 2 with the greatest respect to everybody who put this work together and to the indulgence of my colleagues when you're ready.
Thank you. And can you just give us a heads up about what the amendment would say, please?
I would just adhere to the wishes of the 2 residents, 188 Mary and 43 Robert Street, and not include them as suggested today on the Hamilton Municipal Register of non-designated properties.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions before we go to the amendment, please? Not seeing any. Coming back to you, Councillor Farr.
I'm going to arbitrarily pick Councillor Lloyd Ferguson to second this because I'm sure he's champing at the bit to still be part of the public record, despite him just noting that this is his last planning committee, and thank him for all of his contributions over the years. So this B would, as it reads now, that council continue to include 188 Mary Street and 43 Robert Street, Hamilton on the Municipal Heritage Register as non-designated properties that council believes to be of cultural heritage value or interest pursuant to section there before you of the Ontario Heritage Act. I would change B to that council remove the non-designated properties at 188 Mary Street and 43 Robert Street, Hamilton from the Municipal Heritage Registry pursuant to section 27(8) of the Ontario Heritage Act. And that is seconded by Councillor Lloyd Ferguson.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? You can put your hand down, please, Councillor Farr. Any other comments or questions? Go ahead. Please vote accordingly to the amendment. So the report now, I don't know if you caught it earlier, who's seconding, and if not, then it's Councillor Farr, second by Councillor Pearson. Okay, Danko, sorry, I did say that. Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. We've got everything. Thank you. So, Mr. McFarlane, I'm glad you've waited all this time to come down to the podium. So I'm now going to call on John Fairland, and I hope I'm saying your name properly, respecting legality of rental housing bylaw number 21-166. This was approved at the September 6th meeting, and Councillor Pearson has already noted a conflict. Whenever you're ready, John, you have your 5 minutes.
Thank you. Yeah, basically, I want to start out by saying I recognize how complicated the issue of this is, and I'm not just trying to be negative. What there is there's a natural flow of housing in residential between residential and tenant use. McMaster's been around since 1930. I've been around McMaster for 50 years. When my son went to university, we had 4 kids, and we looked at the cost. We couldn't afford to put the 4th one into school without any extra funding. So we did cost reduction, and we rented out his room. That's a natural flow in the R1. It's an occupancy use, and it's the same occupancy use that it was in before. It's a residential occupancy. That ebb and flow in the city documents you call the secondary housing market. And in your studies, you say that you estimated at 22%. That's in the October 14th PED 07296A. And in that document as well, you say more specifically, staff was requested to investigate a licensing program for regulating student rental housing, a zoning bylaw to limit the number of bedrooms in various housing forms, and a community improvement plan to provide incentives to encourage the deconversion of rental housing to owner-occupied dwellings. When you look at the incentives you provide to encourage that, it basically is a long list of requirements for businesses. And when you achieve that deconversion at 22% of the 2,000 units you're looking at, you're talking about 440 secondary units. And from my experience talking to the neighbors, the majority of us are not going to go about getting a business license because we're not businesses. What happens is that you're not a business if you have a personal use that you're using this residence for. And in my case, it's still my home, but I'm using it for cost recovery. As a result of the fact that it's cost recovery, I'm not charging full rents on it. It's affordable housing, and that's how affordable housing comes into being. One of the neighbors, he got a job in Niagara Falls, and for his last 5 years, he wanted to increase his income. It's an opportunity to advance his career, but he's retiring in 5 years. Well, that retirement now, it's been 3 years ago, is going to occur at the end of next year. And yet this bylaw requires, and he's rented his house out to somebody who lives and works in the neighborhood. And this bylaw requires him by the end of December to apply for a business license in order to rent out his home for the rest of the next year. He has a lease. I have leases with students, and those leases are not considered in this bylaw. You've asked for people to do kick out students. You say you're not going to, but you don't say how. Get down. So first issue is the business license. I don't believe you're able to just unilaterally declare secondary rental market people who have a personal use to be businesses. They need to have the intention of earning a profit, and that, of course, legally is now not as strong as it used to be. If you are doing capital acquisition, then that counts as well, because and in the end you make a profit. So you need the business license in order to be able to allow building inspectors in so that they can apply the Ontario Business Code to these 70 to 90-year-old buildings. But the major reason, so that's you've used an excessive use of the Ontario Building Code. The major reason this bylaw, that's two, the major reason this bylaw is invalid is because it's age discrimination. Where business licensing is, in your bylaw itself, you say you've looked at human rights, and I can't find anything from the city, even though I've called all sorts of people, to find out how you looked at human rights of the fact that you have chosen areas that are student rentals and it's age discrimination. You've got advice from the Ontario Human Rights Commission that says that it is. You've got legal cases, the Ontario London versus somebody that the Ontario Human Rights Commission talked about. The fact that you're not applying it to the whole city makes it attacking students because you're only going against student rentals. I understand I'm out of time.
You are, but we do have some questions for you. If you want to just hang in there for a minute, just wrap up.
Yeah,
and then we'll
okay. The wrap up is that I knew I wouldn't be able to talk about all the issues that are involved here. I sent every one of the councillors a 22-page report that is actually fairly succinct, that talks about the issues, and it'll be in your emails with the heading Bylaw 21-166.
Okay.
And he's gone. So I figured that it would be going to the legal department in order so that you could have your discussion about it. Then I guess the process is that because it was the 29th of September, it has to go to Ontario Superior Court by the 29th of September. I've asked the Ontario Human Rights Commission, they'll let me know whether they want to get involved. But that's just the process. It's not a threat. Questions?
No, that's wonderful. Thank you. And Councillor Danko, I have you down for questions, please. Oh, John? John, if you don't mind, only because so we can hear your answers better if you're by the microphone.
Thank you.
Usually we have to drag people away from the microphone. This is a complete change. Go ahead, Councillor Danko.
Thank you. Just one question for the delegate and then a couple follow-up for staff once we receive. So you said that you have leases with students now, so they're paying you rent.
Mm-hmm.
Do you claim that rent on your income tax?
I do. And there are cases that say that it's still a cost and that it still goes. It's rather interesting that it's not considered a business at the same time.
You claim the rent as income on your income tax. Do you also claim expenses?
Yes, but I don't claim capital cost allowance.
You claim expenses such as upkeep and maintenance, day-to-day business expenses. That's the only way you would be able to claim them on your income tax.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Mr. McFarland? And I hope I'm saying your name right.
It's fine.
Mr. Fairland? Okay, thank you very much. And it has been moved by Councillor Danko, second by Councillor Wilson, to receive the residents' presentation. Thank you very much, sir. Please vote accordingly. Thank you. And now we're on to discussion items, folks. So we're on to, oh, sorry. Oh, my apologies. Councillor Danko, follow up to staff about Mr. Fairland's presentation, please. Go ahead.
Thank you. So I'm not sure what the status of this is, if there is an active legal challenge or not. If there is, then I'm not going to ask my questions in public session. If there's not, then I do have a couple follow-up.
So go ahead. Introduce yourself, please, Monica.
Through the chair, Monica Cirillo, Director of Licensing and Bylaw Services. I would have to speak to legal directly to determine if there is a matter before the court. I am not aware at this point.
There is not. I heard.
So I'll just reiterate a few things that have already been discussed in public session when this bylaw was initially debated. So first of all, could I ask staff if this is specific to student rentals, or is this a broad bylaw, that encapsulates every rental and specifically what those are?
Monica?
Through the chair, it applies to all rentals.
Please introduce yourself.
Oh, Monica Cirillo, Director of Licensing and Bylaw Services.
All rentals with 4 units or less, I believe, is the capture. Thank you. Also about limiting the number of bedrooms, just so I'm clear and the public's clear, it does not limit the number of bedrooms, but it limits what is permitted under the building code.
Through the chair, that is correct.
And finally, just the allegation that this is age discriminatory to students and is therefore somehow a violation of rights or whatnot, and that the bylaw would force or directs or would force people to kick out students. Could you address those two issues?
Through the chair, when it comes to age discrimination, as I had mentioned earlier, the bylaw applies across for all rentals with 4 or less. And I must admit, what was your second question, Councillor?
That the bylaw encourages landlords to kick out students.
Through the chair, it does not. We encourage compliance with our bylaw, but we do not encourage students to be kicked out or any residents to be kicked out of rental homes.
Thank you. And just as was part of the original debate on this, what is in the bylaw is what every single responsible landlord should already be doing. Thank you.
Thank you. And those are the questions asked. I don't see anybody on the speakers list, and the presentation's already been received. So my apologies, Councillor Danko, for jumping ahead there. So now we're on to discussion items. This is the School Zone Special Enforcement Area Pilot, PED. 19238A, and this affects wards 1 and 11. This is on the outstanding business list, folks, and it's been moved by Councillor Wilson, seconded by myself for the recommendations in the report. And I would like to make a comment, if I may turn the chair over to Councillor Ferguson.
Go ahead.
Thank you. So just to let the folks know, the staff have been monitoring school zones very carefully in the 12 years that I've been here. I think we can all attest that we have parking issues, especially at the bell times. Parents like to pick their children up, they like to drop them off, but they also like to get out of the car and walk their child to their classes, and that just creates absolute mayhem, especially in the Binbrook Village. We have 3 schools. Initially, the staff wanted to target one of the 3 schools, and they were very receptive to including the entire village, because we have 2 Catholic schools. If one was targeted, then the other, I can just see the shift of parents going to the other, enrolling their children into the other school so they can avoid this. This is a special fine that's been allotted, nothing similar, or just similar to the Waterfalls situation. Hopefully we can get parents to encourage their children to walk or walk with their children, go on the school bus, ride their bikes, rollerblade, etc. So I am fully supportive of this pilot project, and I have heard nothing but parents and residents across the city saying, how come not my school too? So everyone is all over this. We've got to stop. When I worked at Environment Hamilton, we actually went into a school, and in fact, it's one of the schools that are targeted today. And we brought in maps of the catchment area, and the residents or the students were encouraged in both geography, science, and math classes to document how many miles or how many feet they walked that morning, and they would tabulate them. And the one class that had the most mileage, if you will, they got the pizza party at the end of the month. And it was very, very successful. So the kids were asking their parents not to drop them off because they wanted to add to the figures at the end of the month for their classroom. So I'm hoping maybe working forward and working together with the staff, we can get this walk your child or have your children walk in a group to the school. I only have one question before I sign off, and that is about signage. Before we instigate this program, I'm hoping we can sign the snot out of the village to let everyone know it's coming and that there's no surprises. Can you please comment?
Through the chair, Brian Hollingworth, Director of Transportation Planning and Parking. I'll comment briefly, and then Acting Manager Mike Newell may be able to provide some details. But essentially what this does is we're asking for approval of the pilot. Following this, having trouble speaking today. Following this, we will enact the formal bylaws. So we'll bring those back to council, similar to the Waterfalls bylaw. It's a relatively routine process. And during that period, we'll be working on signage, again, similar to the Waterfalls. We have a group that works with schools, so we'll be trying to work those channels to educate parents and per your suggestion, apply a lot of signage so that this isn't taking people by surprise.
Correct. Thank you very much. And Acting Manager, go ahead.
Thank you very much. Through the chair.
Can you introduce yourself, please?
Oh, sorry. My apologies. Michael Newell, Supervisor, Parking Enforcement and School Safety. This was brought to our attention not long ago, and I believe in 2019 as a council direction to seek out strategies to reduce the congestion and increase or enhance safety paths for children in and around schools. The pilot project was developed and sat with key stakeholders and trustees from the both boards, separate and public. And we landed on these particular schools as a result, just for the pilot itself. In terms of signage, the signage that we currently have in the Waterfall site areas would be similar in nature to that, along with the public service announcements that will be transferred to the residents in the area. In keeping with the schools, the administrators, along with parent-teacher councils, things of that nature, will all keep open channels of communication to ensure that there's knowledge, education, and information.
Thank you very much for that very comprehensive answer. And please let me know what our office can do to help spread the word on this one. And just for the record, it was St. Matthew's that was targeted, and we have 2 other schools, as I said earlier. And what affects one school in that village will affect the others as well. So that's why we wanted to do a whole blanket because the Pembroke Village is very contained. And like I said, what will affect one school will definitely affect the others as well. So this is, I'm fully supportive. So thank you very much. I'll take the chair back. Councillor
You want
Wilson,
to take the chair back, or should I keep before the whole debate of your motion?
It's not my motion. It's a staff report, a pilot project.
Okay, I'll give it to you back.
Well, thank you. So Councillor Wilson, and then it's Councillor Pearson. Go ahead, Councillor Wilson.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm very, very a strong supporter of this report, and thank the staff for the work that preceded the recommendation that is here today. It is in our, just a few comments and then I have some questions. It is in our collective self-interest to encourage children to walk to school. There is a growing abundance, excuse me, of evidence that is concluding that the actual school day begins at breakfast. And then it continues from the time the child leaves the house to school. An abundance amount of evidence showing us that if a child is able to walk in whole or in part to school, that their performance is elevated and they do better in school, they have a longer attention span, and overall, of course, their health improves. And so we have to do everything that we can to enable children to have that level of independence and that activity for a long-term life of health and well-being. And I'm afraid that we have overwhelmingly designed our travel to school in such a way that it is not safe for them. And the area in and around the school can be actually the area of greatest risk when we see parents who are busy with their day, but in so doing can put the risk of others other children. So through you, Chair, to staff, if I could just get a clarification on some of the issues that you have raised. What was the level of staff offered at the special enforcement areas for the Greensville Waterfall area? Thank you.
Thank you. Who would like to take that?
Through the chair, the level of staff that was offered for the Waterfall area was dedicated to enforcement officers, Monday to Friday, inclusive of the weekends, as well as enhanced enforcement that occurred through the weekends and holiday events such as statutory holidays.
Thank you. Councillor?
I'm sorry, to the acting manager, two, did you say two, Mr. Newell?
Through the chair, sorry, my apologies. It was 2 dedicated staff that were listed as part-time and regular enforcement with area staff as well that was registered as full-time. We also had enhanced enforcement that occurred in the form of overtime hours that were allotted to regular staff, weekends, holidays, things of that nature.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, and I believe this council was unanimous in supporting that initiative because of the damage it was doing to the neighborhood, so to property. And we're talking about children here. Could you address the level of enforcement that will be supplied to these 2 pilots to protect children, to assist in the enforcement, at least at the beginning? Thank you.
Mike?
Through the chair, the level of enforcement that we hope to encourage here is just simply by the pilot project itself. I believe in the report, excuse me if I'm not mistaken, they're asking, or there's a potential for more enhanced staff in the form of FTEs, but that will be as something that will be conducted at a later date. We propose to use just the original staff that we have on staff now for patrol and enforcement.
Thank you, Councillor.
So sorry, through the chair, just further clarity on this. Like Greensville, you're not adding staff, but will you be dedicating staff to these 2 pilots at the beginning as part of our efforts to inform and enforce?
Through the chair, that's a distinct possibility that we may have dedicated staff that will be enforcing these areas.
Thank you, Councillor.
Through the chair, if I may, Brian Hollingworth. What we tend to do in enforcement is target specific schools, one or two at a time, in conjunction with Hamilton Police Services and in conjunction with our active and safe routes to school team. So it's a highly visible presence. Our hope is to do that several times for these pilots to leverage the special enforcement fine, basically.
Excellent.
And if it works, expand it to other areas.
Thank you. I really appreciate that answer, Mr. Hollingsworth. Thank you, through the chair. If I could just ask again, similar to my colleague, any assistance the Ward 1 office can provide in the communication of this, happily do so. Correct me if I'm wrong, please. I thought the report said that you will be reaching out to communication staff to assist in the promotion of this and to maybe supply some easy to read language and visuals for school councils, etc., and maybe something that will go home in the backpack. Is that confirmed, through the chair?
Through the chair, yes, that's one of our mainstays. We'd like to be able to keep in contact with the administrators of the school, mailers through the children's agendas, as well as any other kind of City of Hamilton website information that we could supply. We're going to work closely with the officers of communications for the City of Hamilton as well.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And through the chair again, Ward 1 is, I remember a crime manager that was just assigned to Ward 1, and he could not get over the number of people who are active as pedestrians. He said it was like walking into a wall of pedestrians all over the place. And so we have neighborhood schools, and they are old schools that were intended to be walkable. And I'm very, very much supportive of this pilot. Sorry, one final question. How long will the pilot run? Is it just the single year, through the chair? And those are my questions. And again, very grateful.
How long is it going to last?
Yeah, we through the chair, my apologies. We anticipate it commencing and running through the 2023-2024 school year once adopted and approved.
Councillor?
And you'll be reporting back on lessons learned and any adjustments and etc. at that time?
Through the chair, yes, that's correct.
Okay. Thank you again. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Pearson? And then Councillor Danko.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'm certainly very supportive of this and would love to see it expanded. I have a tremendous problem with parents driving their children to school. It's affecting the surrounding homeowners. It's affecting servicing, garbage pickup, school busing issues, etc., and most importantly, safety. I do have, and I appreciate staff mentioning the daily school route organization through Bike for Mike funding that are using Ward 10 right now as a pilot program and working with both the separate and public elementary schools to see what can be done in reducing parents driving their children to school. So I certainly would love to continue to get information on the status of this going forward and how that I'm sure not just me, but I'm sure other colleagues around the table would be interested in the expansion of this program to our specific wards to address this problem. So I'm really, really supportive. I think it's a great opportunity. We just need to instill in parents, you don't need to drive your children to school. I'm going to be very honest. I had one situation where I knew the parent, it's actually a grandparent, driving a grandchild to school, complaining of the congestion of traffic at the front of the school. And I said, but you're causing it. And, when I dug a little deeper, I knew exactly where this person lived. And I said, but your grandchild doesn't even have to get off the sidewalk from where this resident lived to the front of the school, only to cross with the crossing guard at the front of the school. Why are you driving them? this is the frustration. And I'm sure Councillor Wilson, knowing in Ward 1, I grew up in Ward 1, I attended Georgia Allen. I'm going to always call it Georgia Allen. I attended Dalewood, and I walked to and from school or rode my bike. I never, ever had a parent drive me, and you just see how society has changed. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm the world's worst parent. My kids walk. Go ahead, Councillor Danko.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So as other comments, I'm very supportive of this program as well. I'm sure this is an issue citywide. It is certainly an issue in Ward 8. So I'm very much looking forward to the results of the pilot and funding dedicated officers for this if necessary, depending on the results of the pilot. I think a lot of it is setting the expectations up front, at the beginning of the school year, that you can do this, you can't do that. And once those expectations are set, I'm hoping that will set the trend, at each of the locations. The interesting thing about this phenomena is it's parents of children at the school that are the problem. And the no stopping in no stopping areas, kind of parking in front of people's driveways, turning around in people's driveways. And it's just, when you talk to them on site, like, oh, hey, by the way, did you know you weren't allowed to stop there? The responses are sometimes interesting. So I think, as a pilot, this is definitely a step in the right direction. I'm wondering how, you mentioned coordination with Hamilton Police Services, because it's parking, but then there's also moving violations. So how will we coordinate with, what is MLE versus what is police, and will both be on site, at the same time, basically?
Through the chair, the Project Crayon that's been developed through Hamilton Police Service, we've worked closely last school term with them to devote officer presence, Hamilton Police presence, as well as bylaw enforcement to ensure that vehicles who were the recipients of parking infractions did not leave the scene. As you know, our bylaw officers do not have the right to detain individuals, but fortunately the police do. So it was a coordinated effort that was through the week based on reactive issues that were brought by administration, the public, to the Hamilton Police Service about parking in and around the schools. So they would coordinate with our supervisors, and we would create a date in which enforcement would take place as a coordinated effort.
Thank you. That's excellent. And my last question is around parking regulations around schools. I think there's, most of them are fairly well established, but through this program, it might identify areas where we would have to adjust parking regulations, no stopping zones, things like that. Would that be part of the work that's done? You'd expect to have feedback from the officers on site?
Through the chair to Councillor Danko, I think that's a very good point. There may be situations where we want to add parking in some areas, or a little bit farther from the school, maybe there's some underutilized on-street parking. Make that available, allow them to walk further. So that'll all be part and parcel to this.
Excellent.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you. All my questions, and very supportive. Thank you.
Thank you. The report is on the floor. It's been moved by Councillor Wilson, second by myself. Please vote accordingly. Councillor Pearson? Thumbs up?
My e-scribe went down, thumbs up.
Okay.
Oh, my goodness.
I'll vote for you. Don't worry.
Okay.
I'll keep voting. I know, and you got to stop talking now because of the ding. Thank you, everyone. Now we're on to general information, other business. General Manager, AKA Steve Robichaud, would you like to? Thank you, Michael, by the way.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Mr. Thorne was unable to attend today due to illness, but he did ask that I advise the committee, or to recognize the committee for their hard work for this term of council, and just to provide an update. In addition to the work that we've been discussing today that MLE and transportation planning have been doing around rental housing licenses, short-term rentals, the waterfalls, and then the parking master plan, we just wanted to focus on some of the development activity and some of those key indicators. We do often recognize the $2 billion in building permits, but there's a lot of work that leads up to the issuance of those building permits. So for this term of council through Planning Committee, this planning committee has had 102 public meetings under the Planning Act that resulted in the adoption of 68 official plan amendments and 188 rezoning applications. I will be sending out this email to all the members of the committee because there's a lot of stats here. Those 102 public meetings translated into the approval of 10,151 residential dwelling units, which is a pretty significant number. Complementing the work of Planning Committee is also the Development Review Team that deals with the site plans, and that we processed 664 site plans, resulting in the approval of 21,452 residential units through the site planning process. So that is a fairly significant amount of new residential units being created. But also, this committee has approved, either directly or through giving the delegated authority, over 6 million square feet of industrial, commercial, and institutional gross floor area in the city of Hamilton in the last 4 years, and that was supported by 7,600 zoning reviews done by the zoning review section. There was 1,475 minor variance applications that was dealt with in the last 4 years, and 452 consent applications under the delegated authority bylaws. But we've also done some very significant policy initiatives and reforms. So as Shannon and Mrs. Mackay indicated earlier, the secondary dwelling units, accessory dwelling units, the resolution of the appeals to the commercial and mixed-use zoning, the resolution of the outstanding appeals to the downtown secondary plan, the update to the zoning bylaw as it relates to the Pleasant View neighborhood, and the work that was done both through MLE, transportation planning, and the planning group relating to COVID and how we respond to COVID and those zoning bylaw changes, whether through temporary use or bylaws or permanent changes to help support the small business community as they dealt with some of the challenges of COVID. In terms of major policy initiatives, through this term of council, Planning Committee approved the official plan amendment to implement the Grids 2 outcome, which is currently before the minister for approval. There was the approval of the Waterdown Node secondary plan, as well as the update to the policy framework for the Pleasant View area, as well as committee approved the draft consultation papers relating to family-friendly housing, condominium conversions, farm labor residences, green development standards. They adopted the residential care facility discussion paper, as well as the draft urban forest strategy. In addition, there's been multiple designations under the Ontario Heritage Act that have been approved by this committee and council. There's been approximately, I think it's 20 or 25 properties that have been designated, as well as hundreds of properties have been uplifted to the registry, and then we processed over 150 heritage permits. Supporting all of this work is a very lean team, and committee has invested in this in the planning and economic development in order to do those process improvements, including the divisional realignment in terms of roles and responsibilities. Most recently, the adoption of the official plan amendment and the process changes to respond to Bill 109, including additional delegated authority. We've done 2 fee bylaw reviews. There was the report in August on changes to the processes relating to the Committee of Adjustment. In order to respond to some of the challenges that COVID did, it accelerated our pivot and our digital transformation in terms of how we do services here in the city of Hamilton, as well as moving into a public consultation in a virtual world framework. So those are the work that this committee has done. There's been additional work that's reported through to Public Works Committee led by Brian Hollingworth and his team, or to GIC that we can be reporting at as part of the budget process. But on behalf of the entire division, I would just like to say thank you very much. It's been a joy to work with you in the last 4 years, and I'm sure there'll be a lot more work coming in the next 4 years. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a couple of speakers list. Is this on Steve's report? Councillor Ferguson, you're first. Is this on Steve's report? You're muted, sir.
It is about this, and I have some other business too. Yeah, I just wanted to, it was quite a ride for us too, Steve. And I see why we were so busy and the meetings were so long. That's amazing numbers that you just put up. And clearly we, staff did a lot of work on preparing all these reports. Now I see why we're getting some complaints about maybe we shouldn't be moving as quick as we should, is because of the volume that we've put through. And of course, the ultimate measurement is the value of the building permits that we're issuing. And those are all-time records also. So just thank you to you and the and all the staff in planning. It has been a good ride, an exciting ride. I got lured back to planning. The long meetings were very difficult for me to sit that long because I tend to seize up getting in my old age. But it is a lot of activity going on in my ward and in other wards also, and that was reflected in your presentation today. So thank you for that, and I look forward to see it in an email so I can review it again because you went pretty quick. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I'll come back to you for your other item, as you said. Councillor Farr.
Madam Chair, my favorite author, Kurt Vonnegut Jr., once said, "How complicated and unpredictable the machinery of life really is." And who knows if I'll ever have the chance, and I'm so glad that I have it now, to thank all of our planning staff, and especially you, Mr. Director Steve Robichaud, with your encyclopedic brain. Oft you have immediately responded to late night weekend texts from me, and I'm sure all of us, with what could be sometimes deemed as inane questions, but always in a professional manner. You respond, and like I say, quickly. But the staff underneath you, especially the ones that have stuck it out throughout this term with so many great options in regions all around us, it's definitely a hiring market for good planners, and we did lose a few, as Councillor Ferguson alluded to, but they've done a terrific job too. And in circumstances where, as you say, you've had to second many to special projects. We're pivoting Bill 109 and getting our talented staff to understand the repercussions to that end, and again, the competition that we're dealing with out there. So certainly you're aware, you're also politically savvy, that it's being bandied about during this election time that we want to speed up planning processes, and people are making promises in their pitches, and that's well and good. It happens often, but maybe not to the extent we're seeing it now. And you're paying close attention to that, and I'm sure in the next term of council we'll continue to break these records. Certainly 3,000, close to 3,000 of the 10,000 units this term that you've mentioned have come right here in Ward 2, and there's 10,000 more units planned for Ward 2, which actually answers Council's resolved with respect to the no urban boundary expansion, doing our part here. But couldn't do it without you and everybody else, and hopefully Jay bounces back real soon, and you'll pass this along. Thank you very much. I have always enjoyed Planning Committee for the 3 terms so far, and I hope to always continue to.
Thank you. Councillor Danko, then Councillor Pearson. Councillor Danko.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. That is just a phenomenal amount of work. The volume involved there is, I mean, to have it all summed together, it's really shocking. So thanking all of our staff for the amazing job that they do every day. And as Councillor Farr mentioned, the focus is on, we need more, faster, and the approval process and red tape and that kind of thing. But when you look at the overall volume of what's done on a daily basis, it's just astronomical. And you touched on it in your comments, Director Robichaud, about the provincial tinkering with planning permissions and the stresses that those put on the department, basically having to realign a lot of the processes from the ground up. And also there was a pandemic in the middle. So just an amazing amount of work this term, and so proud of the work that our staff does every day. We do have some planners in chambers right now, so you might want to lock the door while we got them here.
He's talking about you guys, by the way.
Also, just want to thank our chair, Councillor Brenda Johnson. This is also her last meeting. It's been a tremendous pleasure to serve with her this term on Planning Committee. I've learned so much from her, and also Councillor Ferguson, also retiring in his final Planning Committee. It has been truly a pleasure to serve with you both, and I'll probably be calling you up for advice next term as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Pearson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And how do you outdo both Councillor Farr and Councillor Danko? But I do also want to thank staff. It's been a tremendous, tremendous time. It's been difficult with COVID. Appreciating all the calls that I kept putting through and the frustration of not just the developers, but the residents on processes, because it was like following a bouncing ball. And I can't say more loudly or strongly, staff have done a stupendous job, absolutely stupendous. And I'd hate to ask if they even went to the point of counting the pages of the number and the reports that we had, because I'm sure it would be overwhelming to residents to know how much goes into preparing the reports, how much reading we have to do to prepare ourselves for the meetings and the applications. But staff do it with such tremendous finesse. And, I just want to be sure they know that it does not go unappreciated. Especially, and I know Jason Thorne, I'm sure it's too bad that he's not able to present this as the head of the department, but I'm really glad that Steve was able to give us the rundown. And I do also want to see the email, because that's a lot of stuff that's been done in the last 4 years. Madam Chair, we also, part of this is building department as well. And we know that they've already hit the $1 billion mark. I think it was the first week in July. So, Hamilton is definitely a destination point. I support development, responsible development, and I'm absolutely very proud of staff today. I will also say thank you to you as the chair this year. And to Councillor Ferguson, it too has been a pleasure working with both of you. We've had our fun times, but we've always put our noses to the grindstone, and we've really worked hard as is indicated here today. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, and I'm the last one on the list. So, Councillor Ferguson, you have the chair while I speak. But before we wrap up,
can I turn you down just for once?
Can you mute him, please? Just turn it off.
Go ahead.
So before we finish, there's also two other people I'd like to thank, and it's Lisa and Leah. Thank you for your efficiency, but also thank you for your sense of humor. You guys, between the two of you, you make these meetings go by pretty smooth, and I will always be grateful for that. And to the staff that are sitting up here right now and those that you represent, your professionalism, your compassion for your job shows through every single day. I can't imagine what it's like when I come to you as a counselor. You have 15 others coming to you for the same, coming at you like this. And you all come through with flying colors. Thank you so much. You've just made this job so much easier for me as chair, but also for me as a counselor. And this is my last meeting for planning, and planning's always been my passion. Before I became a counselor, I was at the OMB as a private person, so I really felt like coming onto the planning committee was just a natural fit. And I will miss this. I think this is one of the few committees I will miss the most. But anyways, thank you very much, everyone. All the best for your journeys going forward. And we'll just move on from there before I get too emotional. So,
Chair, back to you.
Thank you. So thank you to my colleagues. And it's been moved by Councillor Ferguson and seconded by Councillor Farr to receive all the updates that we've heard today. Thank you, everyone. So now we have private and confidential. First of all, I want you to take a look at why we're going in private and confidential, and we may not need to. So Councillor Ferguson, you had your hand waving. You can
I had an item of new business I wanted to bring up too, two of them, in fact.
My apologies. I did say I was coming back to you. So before we go to private and confidential, Councillor Ferguson, go ahead. My apologies.
Thank you. Just a question to our solicitor. Patrick, the community got a letter from Aird Burles about the land tribunal case management case being held on October the 14th for the areas of 392 to 412 Wilson Street. This is the controversial rezoning that has the mire on it, so we denied it. And they're so surprised that this is going before the Ontario Land Tribunal so quickly, and I tried to explain to them that it's just a case management conference. So can you confirm that's all it is and it's a routine thing? And secondly, I know the Ontario Land Tribunal is backed up significantly, but no commitment, but just a rough guess. When do you think it would be heard?
Thank you, Patrick.
Through the chair, so yes, that's correct. The appearance on October 14th for 392 Wilson Street, that is just a first CMC. Nothing will be determined. It's procedural only, so any members of the community who either received notice or who didn't are entitled to show up, watch, request status as they see fit. And in terms of a hearing, yes, the tribunal is fairly backed up at the moment. It's hard to guess exactly where it would go because it depends on how many hearing days are requested, but typically for a 5 to 10 day hearing, which is pretty normal length. Realistically, I'd say we're probably looking at late summer, early fall 2023 for a hearing on the merits at the earliest.
Thank you, Patrick. I appreciate that. I'm sure there's lots of people listening to hear that answer. And my second one, a lot of you are being copied on letters from a resident of Ancaster. He's a person that typically, over my experiences, is like to pick fights on a number of issues. But this involves cutting boulevards. This is the strip of grass between the curb and the sidewalk. And he's refusing to do it now. And particularly on his side yard, because it's a corner lot, and he's now put up signs telling the whole public that this is public property and the public should be cutting the grass. And of course, if we caved into this, it would be quite a cost issue, because if the city has to suddenly start cutting boulevards for the 150,000 plus homes that we have in our community, it would be a big undertaking. And I've always felt it was certainly a moral obligation for them, but it also a legislative requirement and property standards to maintain your property. But he's refusing to do it now, and he's probably put 4 or 5 emails out to all members of council about this, and he seems determined to pick a fight. So I did reach out to our acting city solicitor, Mr. Sable, about a few weeks ago, just to give me confirmation that it is the responsibility of a homeowner to cut that little strip of grass between the curb and the sidewalk on the front of the home, or the side of the home too, in the case of a corner lot. But yeah, I haven't heard back from him yet, and this could snowball into something bigger than it needs to be. So my question is through to municipal law enforcement and to Monica. Monica, is part of the property standards then that a homeowner should be keep his home, including the boulevards, well maintained and not allow weeds just to grow willy-nilly?
Thank you. Monica, are you willing to dive in here?
Through the chair to the councillor, there's certainly a provision in the property standards bylaw that speaks to well maintaining your personal property. There's weeds and other yard maintenance requirements in there. However, I would like the opportunity to talk to Ron Sabot and just see if he has anything further to add to those specific locations on an individual's property.
Thank you, councillor.
No, I agree. I'm in Ron. I've called him up a couple of times. He just says he's got so much on his plate, and he had some holidays in there. But this guy is really elevating this thing, and as I say, every member of council is getting copied on all his emails now, and I wouldn't want to see it get out of control. So the sooner we can get this resolved, the better it would be. And this is the last chance I have to raise it. It'll fall in the lap of the future council, but. Please give this the attention it deserves, because I wouldn't want to see this start off. He's arguing that it's owned by the city, therefore the city should be cutting it. And I question that. That's all I got, Madam Chair.
Thank you. If you can include also the road allowance on everyone's property, not just boulevards, that would be wonderful. Thank you. So again, please, it's been moved and seconded. I think we all voted for the presentations and the questions asked. And now we're at private and confidential. So just to let you know, this is regarding the 522 and 526 Winona Road. If we don't need to go into camera, please let me know. If we do, go ahead, Councillor Pearson, this is your ward.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't believe we need to go in camera. Staff are pretty clear on the recommendation, and I support this going forward. We need this to be defended as far as our position.
I agree. Anyone else? So let me go out of camera. We didn't go in camera. Let me go out of camera. So 14.1, I'm just going to read off what I would have said if we were in open session, clerk. Thank you. The appeal of Urban and Hamilton Official Plan Amendment Application UHOP 22-007 and Zoning Bylaw Amendment Application ZAC 22-015 to the Ontario Land Tribunal for lack of decision for lands located at 522 and 526 Winona Road, Stony Creek, LS 22031 and PED 22191A, Ward 10. It's been moved by Councillor Pearson, seconded by Councillor Danko, that the directions to staff in closed session, in the closed session report respecting report LS 22031 and PED 22191 be released to the public following approval by council, and the balance of the report LS 22031 PED 22119A remain confidential. Appendices, I believe, can be released in public. Correct, Mr. McDonald? Because it's two maps and it's two letters, one from the lawyer, one from the resident, and they're both been mailed to the clerk, so I would assume those are public record.
Yeah, so they've been mailed to the clerk, they would be
Yeah.
public record.
One was mailed, sorry, the lawyer's letter was mailed to the clerk, and the resident's mail was emailed to James, who is the planner on the file. So would that be considered public record as well?
Through the chair, so provided they came in prior to the appeal being filed, they would absolutely be public record.
Yep.
Thereafter, it depends on how they've been submitted.
And their names were crossed out as well, so there's no privacy issues on this as well. Thank you. So appendices A, B, C, and D can be released to the public as per following approval by council, and that the closed session or, open recommendations of the report LS 22031, PED 22191, A be also released to the public. Please vote accordingly. Councillor Farr, everybody's in now? Thank you, everyone. And it's been moved by myself, second by myself, to adjourn. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy the day. Thank you, staff.
Great work, Brenda.
Thanks, Chair.
Good job.
Not just today, but your entire political career.
He doesn't even